you're not investing in ETFs, then you're probably losing money and you're running the risk of losing all your hard-earned invested capital if your strategy is investing in individual stocks only. So in this video, I'm going to be sharing with you 5 types of ETFs that will make you rich. And within each category, I'm going to be sharing with you 2 to 3 high return ETFs that you can actually start investing in today. Somewhere in the middle of the video, I'm actually going to share with you my ETF portfolio. So make sure to not skip any category. I'm also going to share with you the platform that I've been using to invest in my ETFs. And I'm also going to share with you other alternatives depending on where you are in the world. The ETFs that I'm going to share with you are some of the best out there, and they'll give you access to the US stock market, which is the largest in the world. It'll also give you access to the South African market and international markets, including Europe, Africa, and Asia. My name is Yvonne, and on this channel, we talk about all things personal finance, and this is the first episode of the investing series. If you're part of the free squad, please hit the like button now. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please hit the subscribe button. Let's get started. If you're not familiar with ETFs, simply put, an ETF is a basket of stocks. So instead of buying individual stocks in different industries one by one, when you buy an ETF, you're basically buying one stock that gives you exposure, which means that gets you invested in a lot of companies in one. Not only are ETFs affordable, they also diversify your risk, which means they reduce your risk of losing your invested capital, because even though some of the stocks will be negatively impacted, the performance of other stocks in that ETF will counter that negative impact. The reason ETFs are considered affordable is that they give you exposure to an index and they give you the ability to indirectly invest in those indexes at a much lower cost, while still getting the benefits of diversification and any dividend income that comes out of that. The first types of ETFs are called broad market ETFs, and these are good for any investor, whether you're a beginner or a seasoned investor looking to get exposure to a large portion of the market, but also seeking sturdy long-term growth of your invested capital. The most common and lucrative example is the S&P 500, and so any ETF that tracks the S&P 500 is considered a broad market ETF. You also have total stock market ETFs, which give you exposure to the whole market. And in terms of examples, I really like the SPDR S&P 500 ETF, also famously known as the SPY, which gives you exposure to the S&P 500 index. And it's an index that tracks the performance of the top 500 companies listed on the United States stock markets. The SPY's return last year was almost 30%, which makes it one of the top performing ETFs in the world, and one that you can get exposure to whether you're in South Africa, in the United States, the UK, or in any country across Africa and Europe. If you're in South Africa, you can also get exposure to the S&P 500 through the Signia SYG 500, or the Satrix S&P 500 ETF. Another exceptional broad market ETF is the VTI, which is the Vanguard Total Stock Market Index, which gives you exposure to the entire United States stock market, which is the largest in the world, like I mentioned, and also provides strong diversification benefits. Let me know if you're invested in either the SPY or the VTI. I know the most popular ones are the VU and the SCHB, but what do you think about the VTI and the SPY? So in my portfolio, I'm invested in the VTI and it has really served me well, which actually returned marginally more than the SPY. These US stock market ETFs are simple, reliable, and they are tried and tested. And so the risk of you losing your invested capital is minimized. In my last video where I talked about how I became a millionaire, if you haven't watched that, watch that after this. A lot of you send me emails asking me about the platform that I'm using, because I mentioned that I also use an alternative to easy equities. The platform that I've been using and I've been really enjoying is called brokstock, because of the market research, also the low fees, and the fact that I actually earn interest of between 8 to 10%, which is considered high yield on my uninvested capital. And if you're a beginner and you're afraid of starting to invest, brokstock actually has a risk-free investing promo, which I benefited from, where after you actually register on the platform, they recommend 5 shares. And if any of those 5 stocks actually drop in share price in the first month, they'll actually reimburse you for that loss. So I've been really enjoying it. As a person who is using easy equities, I've also found this platform to be easy to use. And because I really believe in the platform, if you're one of the first 200 people to use my link in the description box below to register and deposit your first 500 to start investing, you're invited to a free ETF Investing Masterclass that I'm going to be hosting on the 7th of December. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below. And so if you actually use my link, please send me an email with the confirmation and I'll send you the private link and the details of the masterclass. The second types of ETFs that are really high return are called dividend ETFs. And these focus on companies that regularly pay dividends, so on a monthly, quarterly, or annual basis, which improve your total return. So your total return would be made up of your capital gains and the dividends that you actually make from those ETFs. Some examples of dividend ETFs that have really performed well is the SDY, which is the SPDR SP Dividend ETF, which offers exposure to US companies with a history of consistently increasing dividends. Like I mentioned, this is suitable for ETF investing beginners or investing veterans. If you actually invested in this one, please let me know in the comment section below. The one that I'm invested in is called the DJD, which is the Invesco Dow Jones Industrial Average Dividend ETF. And unlike the SDY, this ETF provides exposure to companies in the Dow Jones Industrial Average Index that actually have a track record of consistently paying high dividends and have consistently increased their dividend over time. Dividend ETFs are good for ETF investing beginners or seasoned investors that are looking to generate an income while still benefiting from the capital growth. These ETFs are available on brokstock, which has recently started paying dividends on US stocks, which is actually huge. The third type of ETF, which hasn't been really performing well globally, is the bond ETFs. And these are lower risk, more stable, and you can actually earn an interest from investing in them, monthly, quarterly, or annually. Put together with other stock ETFs, so dividend ETFs, and the broad market ETFs, bond ETFs actually further diversify the risk of loss of your invested capital, which means that they balance your portfolio out. So you can use Warren Buffett's 90-10 portfolio allocation, where he allocates 90% towards stock ETFs and 10% towards bond ETFs. And if you don't want such an aggressive portfolio allocation, you can use the 70-30 or the 60-40 portfolio allocation split. So in this category, the only bonds that have been performing well that I have seen are South African bonds. And so I'm invested in the Satrix SA Bond ETF just to balance out my portfolio, also known as the STF Gov. Another South African bond ETF that's been performing okay is the One Invest SA Bond ETF, also known as the ETF BND. Let me know what your favorite bond ETF is if you're already invested. Maybe you might convince me to actually change up my portfolio. And then the fourth type of ETF is my favorite, and these are sector ETFs, which give you exposure to specific sectors. And as a beginner ETF investor or seasoned investor, these are targeted specific industries that you believe will outperform. So this strategy for me helps me zero in and double down on the industries that I'm particularly interested in. So in my portfolio, at some point, I was really zeroed in on technology ETFs, but now I'm more focused on real estate. And so based on my experience, some examples are the SPDR Technology Select Sector ETF, which offers exposure to technology companies in the S&P 500 index. And the one that has been really serving me well is the VNQ, which is the Vanguard REITs ETF, which offers exposure to real estate investment trusts, REITs, that tracks the MSCI US Investable Market Real Estate 25 out of 50 index. And like I said, this is for investors that are really trying to double down on real estate. So if that's not you and you're more into technology, then the first one would be a better option. Brokstock has over 225 ETFs to select from. So you're spoiled for choice if you actually live in South Africa. Other platforms that you can use if you're in the United States, the UK, and other European countries are eToro, Vanguard, Robinhood. If you know other good trading platforms that could help others, please leave them in the comment section. If they're in the UK, Trading 212 is pretty good. I'm quite familiar with that one. I actually used to use eToro and Easy Equities before I moved to Brokstock. So eToro is also pretty good. And then Fidelity or Charles Stanley. Let me know if there are other platforms that are really good right now that you would recommend if you're living in the UK or any other country across Europe. And then the last type of ETFs are really important to include in your ETF portfolio. And these are international ETFs, which give you exposure to other international markets. So if you're living in South Africa and you want exposure to other international markets, Europe, Asia, Australia, excluding the United States, or just focused on emerging markets, then these are really good. The one that I'm invested in on Brokstock is the VWO, which is the Vanguard FTSE Emerging Markets ETF. And this last year returned about 12%, and it gives me exposure to emerging markets, including China. As an investor who really believes in the growth potential of emerging markets, this one is a really good one to have in your portfolio. And the benefit of investing in these international ETFs is again diversification to help you spread your risk across different markets. Because different markets respond to global events very differently, you actually want to have exposure to different markets so that you don't lose your hard-earned money. And that's it. Those are the different types of ETFs and some of the best ETF options, including dividend ETFs that will make you rich in the long term. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, then you might enjoy some of the other videos that I've done on this channel, particularly how I became a millionaire by the time I was 31. I'll see you there, or I'll see you in my next one. Take care.